Have you ever wondered how something as seemingly small as pride could lead to the downfall of an angel? Imagine this: a being of unimaginable beauty and power cast down from the heights of heaven because of one fatal flaw. What if I told you that same pride still lurks in our hearts today, influencing our choices, relationships, and even the way we view ourselves? In today's video, we're diving deep into the sin of pride, what the Bible calls the root of all destruction. We'll explore how pride caused the fall of Lucifer, turning him from a glorious angel into the enemy of God, and how this same sin continues to shape the modern world in ways we might not even realize. Lucifer. His name once meant light bringer. He was a magnificent being, an angel of the highest order, described in the scriptures as radiant, perfect in beauty, and full of wisdom. In Ezekiel 28:12-17, we see a vivid depiction of Lucifer's unmatched glory. He was adorned with every precious stone, his settings crafted by God himself. He walked among the fiery stones, close to the presence of the Almighty. In every way, he was exalted, a masterpiece of creation. But it was not enough. In Isaiah 14:12-15, we are given a glimpse into Lucifer's heart. His ambition grew beyond his divine purpose. I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the Mount of Assembly. I will make myself like the Most High. These words reveal the core of his rebellion, pride. Lucifer's desire wasn't just to reflect God's glory, it was to claim it for himself. He wanted equality with God, a throne of his own, and the worship of creation. This rebellion had devastating consequences. Lucifer's pride disrupted the harmony of heaven, challenging the authority of God. The result was swift and final. He was cast down from heaven, stripped of his former glory, and transformed into Satan, the adversary. Revelation 12:7-9 describes the great war in heaven, where Michael and his angels fought against Lucifer and his followers, who were ultimately defeated and expelled. But the consequences didn't stop there. Lucifer's fall marked the introduction of sin into creation. He became the tempter, the one who would deceive humanity into sharing in his rebellion. His pride became the root of all sin, the driving force behind the brokenness we see in the world today. What began as a seed of ambition in the heart of an angel has since grown into a force that corrupts nations, divides people, and blinds hearts to the truth. Lucifer's story is not just a tale of ancient rebellion, it's a warning. His fall reminds us of the destructive power of pride, a sin that can take even the most exalted and bring them low. The question we must ask ourselves is this: where might pride be hiding in our own lives, and how can we guard against it before it takes root? The sin of pride didn't stop with Lucifer's fall. It made its way into humanity, starting with the very first man and woman. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve lived in perfect harmony with God, surrounded by his blessings. Yet one lie changed everything. Satan tempted them with the idea that eating from the forbidden tree would make them like God, Genesis 3:5. It was a subtle but powerful appeal to pride, the desire to elevate themselves, to take control of their own destiny, and to know what only God knows. Their choice to disobey introduced sin and death into the world, a consequence that echoes through every generation. Centuries later, another striking example of pride appears in the story of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. His empire was one of the most powerful in history, and he took full credit for its glory. In Daniel 4:28-37, we see his boastful declaration, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" But his pride provoked God, who humbled him in the most dramatic way. Nebuchadnezzar lost his sanity and lived like an animal in the wilderness, eating grass and being drenched by the dew of heaven. It wasn't until he acknowledged God's sovereignty that his kingdom and his sanity was restored. This story is a vivid reminder that pride blinds us to our dependence on God, often leading to humiliation before restoration. In the New Testament, pride takes on a more subtle but equally dangerous form: spiritual arrogance. The Pharisees, religious leaders of Jesus' time, were masters of the law and outward displays of piety. Yet their pride in their own righteousness blinded them to their need for grace. Jesus repeatedly confronted them, calling them hypocrites who looked holy on the outside, but were full of greed and self-indulgence on the inside. Matthew 23:25. Their obsession with status and appearances made them miss the very Messiah they claimed to be waiting for. These examples from Scripture show how pride can manifest in different ways, through disobedience, self-glorification, or spiritual arrogance. And in every case, the consequences are severe: separation from God, humiliation, and missed opportunities for redemption. The question we must ask ourselves is this: are we repeating the same mistakes today? Are there areas in our lives where pride is leading us away from God's truth? Pride has taken on new forms in the modern world, often hiding in plain sight under the guise of self-expression, ambition, or intellect. One of the most glaring manifestations of pride today is found in social media, where the cult of the ego thrives. Platforms designed to connect us have become stages for comparison and self-promotion. People curate their lives to showcase perfection, chasing likes and validation. Behind the filters and captions, pride subtly takes root, creating a cycle of envy, insecurity, and dissatisfaction, not just in those who seek approval, but also in those who measure their worth against others. In the workplace, pride often disguises itself as ambition. While striving for success is not inherently wrong, it becomes dangerous when it crosses healthy boundaries. Pride can push people to step over others, compromise their values, or idolize their achievements. Titles, accolades, and material wealth become markers of self-worth, leading to burnout, strained relationships, and a loss of purpose. It's the same lie Lucifer believed, that our value comes from our status rather than our identity in God. Intellectual pride is another hallmark of our age. With access to endless information, many fall into the trap of thinking they have all the answers. This often leads to contempt for opposing views, a refusal to admit mistakes, and an inability to engage in respectful dialogue. The rise of cancel culture exemplifies this, where people are condemned for past missteps, often without the chance for growth or redemption. At its core, this form of pride places judgment and self-righteousness above humility and grace. The impacts of pride on society are profound. It creates division, fueling conflicts between individuals, communities, and even nations. Pride fosters an us versus them mentality, where humility and compromise are seen as weaknesses rather than strengths. Relationships fracture under the weight of inflated egos, and opportunities for reconciliation are lost. On a spiritual level, pride distances us from God. When we place ourselves at the center, we lose sight of His sovereignty and our need for His grace. The question we must ask ourselves is this: how has pride infiltrated our lives? Is it in the way we seek approval online, in our relentless pursuit of success, or in our unwillingness to listen to others? Recognizing pride is the first step toward overcoming it, but it requires humility, a virtue that, in today's world, often feels countercultural. The Bible offers a clear and powerful antidote to the sin of pride: humility. Far from being a sign of weakness, humility is presented as a path to strength, grace, and restoration. At the heart of this message is the example of Jesus Christ, who demonstrated the ultimate act of humility. In Philippians 2:5-8, we are reminded of how Jesus, though equal with God, made Himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. He humbled himself to the point of death on a cross, willingly giving up his divine privileges to serve and save humanity. His life teaches us that true greatness is found not in exalting ourselves, but in laying down our lives for others. The Bible repeatedly emphasizes the importance of humility as a safeguard against pride. Proverbs 16:18 warns us that pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. This truth is echoed in James 4:6-7, where we are told, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Humility invites God's grace into our lives, while pride builds walls that separate us from Him. To overcome pride, we must recognize our dependence on God and submit to His authority, trusting that He will guide and uplift us in His perfect timing. But how can we actively combat pride in our daily lives? The Bible provides practical steps we can take to cultivate humility. First, we must practice daily self-reflection and confession. Pride often goes unnoticed because it hides in our thoughts and motivations. By taking time to examine our hearts and confess our struggles to God, we bring our pride into the light where it can no longer grow unchecked. Another powerful way to fight pride is through acts of service. When we serve others, we shift our focus from ourselves to the needs of those around us. Whether it's helping a neighbor, volunteering, or simply offering encouragement, service teaches us to value others above ourselves, just as Jesus did. Finally, gratitude is a key weapon against pride. When we regularly thank God for His blessings, we acknowledge that every good thing in our lives comes from Him. Gratitude reminds us of our dependence on His grace and helps us avoid the trap of thinking we've achieved success on our own. In a world that often glorifies self-promotion and independence, embracing humility requires a countercultural mindset. But as the Bible shows us, humility is not just the cure for pride. It's the gateway to a deeper relationship with God and a life of lasting peace and purpose. The choice is ours. Will we continue to elevate ourselves, or will we follow the example of Christ, finding true freedom in surrender? Pride is a sin that has left its mark on every corner of creation, from the rebellion of Lucifer to the fall of humanity, and even in the struggles we face today. It was pride that led an angel of light to become the adversary of God, introducing chaos and sin into the world. It was pride that tempted Adam and Eve, that toppled kings, and that blinded religious leaders to the truth of God's grace. And it is pride still that whispers lies into our hearts, urging us to seek our own glory instead of God's. But there is hope. The Bible reveals a path to restoration, and it begins with humility. Pride destroys, but humility rebuilds. Pride separates us from God, but humility brings us closer to Him. The choice is laid before each of us. Will we follow the path of Lucifer, consumed by pride and rebellion, or will we follow the example of Christ, embracing humility and surrender? One leads to destruction, the other to redemption. Take a moment to reflect. Are there areas in your life where pride might have taken root? Perhaps it's in your relationships, your ambitions, or even your spiritual life. How is pride shaping your decisions, your words, and your actions? And more importantly, how can you begin to combat it today? The good news is that the choice is yours. Through prayer, service, and gratitude, you can take steps toward humility, inviting God's grace into your life. And as you walk this path, remember the words of Jesus. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Matthew 23:12. Choose humility, and let it transform your heart, your relationships, and your purpose. The journey may not be easy, but it is the way to freedom, peace, and eternal life with God. If this message resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to stay updated on new content. I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you recognize and combat pride in your life? Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and support each other on this journey.